So look, doing this big rewatch of every single Heisei Kamen Rider has been an incredible experience so far. I think it's made me appreciate some shows more, and I think in general I've been better at discerning each show's quality not only as its own thing, but as a show that fits into the greater tapestry of what exactly Kamen Rider is. That is to say, it's been enlightening. I've been enlightened by these shows. The first leg of this journey has been really good for putting things into perspective as well. Like how Agito airing a little bit too close to Kuga in its first half really just comes from Toei being a little too hesitant to get too crazy and mess up what they'd been working so hard for. And even noticing that Agito kind of feels like deja vu of Kuga in and of itself is a bit of perspective I hadn't really thought of before I watched it directly after Kuga. And that makes Ryuki all the more impressive. Ryuki really just upended everything and just made it work. It gave modern Kamen Rider stronger definition by breaking down exactly what it means for someone to be a Kamen Rider. And the fact that it was very successful for it is probably one of Toei's greatest triumphs in this era. Ryuki being successful did a lot of things from the show. Most importantly, it gave Toei the confidence to go buck fucking wild. And apparently, the first order of business was to give the show back to Toshiki Inoue. Akito's a really good show. Jetman's great as well. But I feel like even at the time, this could have felt like a weird step back. I don't really know exactly, I wasn't there, but Inoue's not exactly new blood, you know? And after Ryuki let loose, it felt like a more restrained, calculated move to just go back to Inoue again. And in some ways, it was, but Inoue and producer Shinichiro Shirakura had some real shit in the works. Kamen Rider may have looked like it was taking a bit of an off year after how wild Ryuki was, but in fact, it was actually going to continue its evolution. And I'll be completely honest, I was kind of dreading this episode, because when I first watched Vice a little over 6 or 7 years ago, I really hated it. I wasn't feeling any of the characters, I thought the plot development was incredibly frustrating, and I just felt like the show was a mess. I had almost zero good feelings about it after I finished it, and I held on to that view of the show for a very long time. If you asked me even just last year what my least favorite Kamen Rider show was, I'd probably say Vice. That is, until I decided to give the show another shot. Let's start at the one thing I have always loved, though, and that's the visual design. Vice is fucking slick, and I don't mean just the suit design. One of the largest elements in the show is the presence of Smart Brain, this mega corporation that seemingly had a hold on the entire city, and one that feels very evocative of giant companies like Apple or Google. Seeing as they're also the developers of the belts the characters use in the show, the entire interface of Vice is super sleek, and it feels designed rather than magical or mystical or something. The belts, the weapons, everything, and God, the suits. Vice is a fan favorite design, I think, and that's for good reason. Those big ol' eyes, the light piping all over the suit, the usage of all that cold metal, it's just really cool shit. And they iterate on the Kuga Titan form thing where he pulls out the handle on his bike and it turns into a sword, but this time when Vice does it, it's a fucking lightsaber. That owns. And the same goes for Kaiza and Delta, the two other riders in the show. I could say a lot of the same things for each of them, so I suppose I won't get into too much detail. But I do love how Kaiza looks like a perfect pair in design to Vice, and I love the difference in how Vice and Kaiza's phones flip out and interact with the belt. Delta's a bit more different, but still largely playing with the same ideas. The belt works with a microphone where you speak a phrase into the phone gun thing to initiate the transformation. It's pretty unique. I mean, Time Ranger did it a couple years before with Time Fire, but still! Then there's the Orphanox. These guys rule. They honestly rival and kinda beat out the Grongi as the most developed, well-thought-out collection of monsters in Heisei Kamen Rider thus far. Which I guess isn't saying that much aside from the Grongi thing, because Akito didn't really develop any unknown farther than just scary monster, and Ryuki largely doesn't even have monsters outside of the contract beasts and the locust things towards the end of the show. I don't want to undersell how good the Orphanox are, though. First off, they have these monochromatic designs that they're incredible, especially with how much color glows off of the rider suits. There's a great contrast between the two. Also, whenever the Orphanox kill folks, or riders kill them, or they kill each other, they completely turn into ash, which is really, really damn cool. I honestly probably couldn't tell you exactly why it's super cool now that I think of it, but it's an alternative to explosions, and it's just awesome whenever dudes get dusted, even though they still do kind of explode sometimes. Either way, it rips. It's awesome. And since I'm already drawing the distinction between Riders and Orphanox, let's get into the premise of Phase. Kamen Rider Phase is, at its essence, a show about two different groups of people interacting with each other. In love, in battle, in friendship, by chance, in almost every way you could imagine two groups of people interacting. Our first group is the group centered around our main rider, Phase. I haven't drawn attention to it yet, but yes, the show's title is written out Kamen Rider 555, but it's pronounced Phase. The name of the rider is Phase, but 555 is what he enters on his phone to transform. So that's it. That's why. It's weird. It gets weirder later. There are other shows with much more interesting titles, let's say. But yeah, here's your first taste of it. Let's get into the Phase group. We have Sona Damari, who was sent the Phase gear before the series began. However, she can't use it for reasons. Mari then encounters Inoue Takumi, who is more than a little standoffish and deeply childish, but he bears the ability to use the Phase gear, so he kind of just becomes the de facto protector of the group, and in turn, he's our main character. Both of our characters then end up staying up at this dude Keitaro's place because Keitaro is entirely too nice for his own good, and then they all just start working at his dry cleaning place together. This dynamic is really goddamn sweet, and just chock full of funny interactions with all three of their personalities clashing. Mari's a go-getter, Keitaro's an absolute doormat, and Takumi is just the most reluctant protagonist you could possibly ask for. Takumi being this way is a pretty big change from the last three shows, where all three of the main writers are sweetie pie goofballs, all at varying levels of competence. Takumi, in comparison, is a lot more fickle, a lot moodier, and I'd imagine for some people, a good deal more relatable of a protagonist than you would get in Kuga, Agito, and Ryuki. Though on the other side of the same coin, he could be a lot more frustrating, too. I've been on both sides of the fence. We've moved from the aspirational protagonist at this point to someone really down-to-earth, and that's a super meaningful change that the show finds a lot of time to play with and examine, and continues to in future shows. Takumi picking up the Phase gear and actually fighting proves to be somewhat of a process, which is pretty refreshing as the writers thus far in Heisei adapted to their lives of fighting evil in a fairly positive way. Even if they had a rough go of it, there's usually an element of positivity to their roles that makes you feel like they can tough it out. With Takumi, he's kind of his own greatest threat to continuing to fight as a rider. His faith in the entire prospect of fighting gets shaken all the time, and a lot of that comes down to self-worth, I think. It's less of a pacifism thing. It only gets worse with the way that he handles this, too, where he just blocks people out by being mean or standoffish. So yeah, he's extremely different for our main writer at this point in the show's history. Our other trio of characters bears a very different vibe from the Phase trio, I think. While kind of embodying a similar dynamic where they're kind of an odd trio, couple thing, thruple, whatever. I'm not gonna... We have Yuji Kiba, a young man set to marry who unfortunately was involved in a car accident that left his parents dead and himself in a coma. Fun. Once he woke up from his coma at the beginning of the series, though, he found that his former fiancée had moved on. And more than that, he found that he bears supernatural abilities on account of waking up from his coma as an orphanok. He desperately tries to cling to his old life before lashing out and killing his former fiancé's current partner, and then later, his former fiancée. Kiba is then tracked down by folks at Smart Brain and put into an apartment where he can start his new life as an orphanok, with one simple mission: to kill humans. We also see Yuka Asada, a typically docile and quiet girl who's basically been emotionally and physically abused her entire life by her family and classmates, until she finally snaps, killing in a gymnasium of classmates with her newfound orphanok powers, which she received after dying from a fall down iced-over stairs. Are you having fun yet? This is fun, right? We're talking about fun things? The last of this trio is Naoya Kaido, a really weird guy who was a guitar prodigy at his school before being left with a broken hand after an accident. The accident was intentional. When we first meet him, he's killed by an orphanok, which then turns him into one himself. These three are sort of grouped together under that same goal by Smart Brain to kill humans. This serves two purposes: killing humans, which Smart Brain finds cool and fun, and also making more orphanoks, which can happen at seemingly random chance after you kill a human. The twist with all this, though, is that none of our three orphanoks want to kill people. In fact, they just want to live out their lives as normal humans, which being orphanoks doesn't really stop, like at all. Orphanoks don't have any kind of vampiric thirst for blood or sustenance or anything. They're just people with abilities that they can just totally ignore if they want to. I think this is actually kind of a smart choice on a writing level, because it puts all the onus here on the decisions with these powers, and it doesn't really cut them any slack if they give in. You would think that the Orphanok plotline here is a lot more infrequent than the Rider stuff, but it's actually pretty incredible how both groups are actually given equal spotlight, especially in those setup stages of the show. The method of composing these two groups is really smart too. The way that the Fives group is brought together through sheer happenstance, mostly centered on humorous interaction, and the way that the Orphanoks are brought together through tragedy, and almost forced together through outside forces. These two moods, these elements, are gonna be what truly builds the backbone of the show. And the backbone proves to be incredibly strong too, because this setup leads to me kinda just forgiving a lot of things I would have found frustrating in previous Inoue shows. For instance, misunderstandings in this show feel a lot more believable here, because all these characters genuinely seem hurt or confused or naive enough to completely misread certain situations the show presents. And when you add the fact that the Fives gear and other belts can be used by a bunch of different folks, except women apparently, in a way, and since those belts are often stolen from our protagonists, it actually makes just plain sense how the story develops around these misunderstandings. In Agito, all three of our writers actually felt like reasonable, nice people at their core, so them acting like thick-headed assholes at each other on occasion always felt off. That's not the case here. There's also the love triangles, which Jetman handled, well, it sure handled it. And when I was watching through Fives recently and started catching a whiff of some love triangle shenanigans, I started to get really wary of the whole thing. But I was well and truly shocked by how much this stuff honestly worked for me. I think it's seriously because, spoiler, none of the love triangles work out. There's a lot of projection going on with these love plots that honestly feels genuine to how vulnerable these characters feel. They're just trying to figure shit out, and a couple of them on occasion will think that a relationship might be their solution. And honestly, that's an authentic thing for these characters to feel. And the fact that it gets so messy and awkward at times, and at other times really funny, is a testament to how strong the character writing in the show truly is. Seriously, I can't say enough nice things about how the Orphanoks and the humans bounce off of one another. It's seriously brilliant stuff, and this is the place where the show feels the most like a successor to Ryuki. As far as actual villain stuff goes, a few episodes in we get introduced to the Lucky Clover group, a selection of super strong Orphanochs that Smart Brain uses to execute other Orphanochs that don't follow their order to kill humans. They also just, do harm to humans as usual, it's villain shit. Lucky Clover is kind of a constantly shifting beast, so I won't exactly go into depth with their character traits or whatever, but I will say that the infighting that does go on with Lucky Clover is one of the more fun parts of the show, and distracts you from the fact that Smart Brain is kind of little more than a mechanic of the story to shift things along. Move around the chess pieces here and there, that kind of thing. They're conflict instigators, which, I guess you could describe any villain as that, but there's not a whole lot to it, is what I'm saying. The real star of the show is the character dynamics between all of our heroes and allies. So the villains actually feel like more of a means to an end, which is totally fine. It doesn't take away from the show at all, because it's not exactly about that. A possible piping hot take of mine is that in retrospect, Agito kind of feels like a first draft run of what Agito would run with in his work on Faiz. Now, this isn't exactly the case. Agito has a lot of things that's very different from Faiz, but the most obvious element of this point is the fact that the element I based most of my Agito video on, the Akatsuki incident survivors, really feels iterated and improved upon with this show and the Ryusei School. Similarly to the Akatsuki survivors, the students of the Ryusei School are a group of people affected by an incident in the past at their class reunion that all of them are still trying to piece together and move on from to this day. Mari was one of those students. We meet a bunch of other members of the school as they try to investigate what exactly happened at the reunion after they get a hold of the second Rider belt, the Kaiza gear. Now, the Kaiza gear has a habit of killing its users, so it doesn't exactly find a permanent user until other classmate Masato Kusaka shows up to use it. We'll get to Kusaka in a minute. The reason why I say Ryusei School is a marked improvement over the handling of a similar plot in Agito is that it's not really touted as a central plotline here, like the Akatsuki stuff was in Agito. So what that does here is actually just give the true spotlight to the character interactions once again, which are all mostly informed by the here and now, by general, messy impressions of other people that our characters pick up on. Sometimes these instincts are wrong, and sometimes they're completely dead on. And I think a definite strong suit of Faiz is that it doesn't quite pretend that it's got everything figured out. It's strangely humble. There's a method to this madness. Speaking of madness, let's talk about Kusaka. Kusaka is, well, God, he's just the fucking worst. There's no real other way of putting it. It's basically impossible to watch through this show and not come out of it hating the guy to some degree. He's everything the show isn't. He's incredibly sure of himself, mind-blowingly arrogant, and suspicious of everything around him. Something important to keep in mind about the central six characters is that they're all wishing for the best, and assume the best out of each other. There's no real reason for any of them to hold malice for one another. Like, sure, Kiba could hate Faiz, on the battlefield, but he has zero reason to hate Takumi, and no reason to suspect that they're the same person. Kusaka's kind of like a cannonball, breaking the surface tension in a body of water. He just kind of shakes everything up and causes massive ripples all around him. It's not really a stretch to say that Kusaka is kind of the key to this whole show. He makes everyone and everything in the show react to his presence, and at times, he's the closest thing this show has to an actual central villain. Everyone fucking hates this guy. He absolutely hates Orphanochs due to the Ryusei class reunion, and so has a one-track mind to kill all of them that he comes across. Takumi, by comparison, takes things more on a case-by-case basis, only ever after going the ones that actively harm people. But by Kusaka's presence, you feel that he's almost pushed to be more proactive. Kusaka tells different stories to different characters at times, sowing doubt in a dynamic that previously had none. He's a complete and total toxic presence, and he does wonders for the show. He's seriously the fucking worst, and I love him. And the worst thing? You kinda get the impression that if he was only just a little more chill, he could be pretty cool. It's easy to understand why he'd be so steadfast on the Orphanok thing, and you honestly feel sorry for him at times given how pathetic the guy can feel, especially when it comes to his romantic subplot with Mari, which, don't worry, goes nowhere. It's completely one-sided and stems from some weird mommy issues. And this is the one thing the entire cast sees as super creepy and weird, and the show doesn't really allow him much in the way of good grace with the whole thing. It's just framed as completely pathetic, which is a pretty far cry from the way Inoue wrote the love triangle in Jetman, where it kind of wants you to feel good about where it goes, even though Guy's awful, and you shouldn't feel good about it. So yeah, definite improvement on that, while also writing a similarly bastardous character. The dynamic by around the 30 episode mark is honestly pretty golden. The show kind of settles into this almost slice of life groove, where every week we get another chapter in the ongoing soap operatic life of these people navigating modern living while under the thumb of this giant megacorporation, basically standing in for all societal pressures. We see them pick up random part-time jobs they don't commit to, we see them fall in and out of love, we see them bleach their fucking hair. It's wild, but it's sweet, intense, and god, it's just some good TV. All of this is in service of exploring the overarching theme of Vi's, the exploration of moral gray areas. If Ryuki was all about comparing and contrasting people with a fundamentally good and righteous reason for fighting against people with malicious intent, then Vi's is all about what happens when you can't even distinguish the two. What happens when you don't even know who you're fighting. I mean, for God's sakes, this show actively puts the mask, the common, in Kamen Rider to good use. There are so many times when the characters truly don't know who's under the suit. And for double God's sakes, the Orphanoks are literally gray. They're gray. Gray area. The whole body. That's the gray area. This whole thing keeps rolling into the final couple arcs or so, which hold the greatest revelations for the series. So if you're already sold on the series at this point, this is the point in the video where I'd tell you to go forth and watch the show. You might like it a lot. If you do, or you don't, just tell me about it in the comments or shout at me on Twitter or something. I'd love to hear about it, because at this point onward, I'm gonna be going into some serious spoiler territory, and I'd hate to give stuff away for people, so yeah. Here's your warning. So there's the arc centered around Kamen Rider Delta, and there's not too much to go over here other than the fact that the belt gets passed around a lot, and this is the point in the show where seeds of genuine mistrust are sown between all the cast, mostly by Kusaka. Eventually, Delta finds its permanent owner in Mihara, another one of the Ryusei reunion victims, played by Atsushi Harada, who previously played Go Green in Go-Go 5, so, there you go, Sentai fans. The rug is pulled completely out from under the show, once this arc kind of winds down and starts transitioning into final stuff, with the revelation that Takumi is in fact an Orphanok, the lone wolf. I could honestly do an entire video on just how good this twist is. It genuinely changes your view of the show up to that point, and its main character, and the way it's carried out is pretty masterful on Inoue's part. This is also one of the best executions of the hero made from the same thing as the monsters motif that's pretty integral to Kamen Rider as a whole. Also, from some fragmented memories that resurface in Mari, it seems as if Takumi himself was behind this attack on the Ryusei reunion, which causes things to be really tense. The fallout from this twist is really great too, as it pushes Kiba and the other Orphanoks a bit closer to Takumi, while his friends start fearing him, with Kusaka especially feeling emboldened by the revelation, going even harder into his whole bullshit, now going after Takumi. A lot about the fallout here feels authentic. It legitimizes the fear that everyone has in this show and in real life, that once someone gets too close, they'll stop caring about you. And that's the center of this entire show as well. It's the genuine fear of closeness. It's why Takumi is the way he is, it's why Kusaka is the way he is, it's why Mihara is so scared of even being Delta, it's why the Orphanoks have such a hard goddamn time. This is Hedgehog's Dilemma, the show. After some time dealing with the Takumi twist, All is revealed in regards to the Ryusei reunion, revealing that, surprise surprise, Smart Brain and the Lucky Clover Orphanox and all that were behind everything, and Takumi was actually trying to just save everyone. I will admit that the stuff behind the Ryusei reunion reveal is pretty messy, and there's some weird, memory loss stuff going on, but thankfully, like I said before, this plotline never quite felt like it was the absolute center of the show, so I feel like personally this stuff being kind of messy didn't bother me as much as it really could have. The desired effect is achieved, though, with Takumi returning back to his friends, bringing the show back to a relative sense of peace before the final arc begins. In the final 10 episodes, we have a whole lot of crazy story events that bring some pretty cruel ends to certain characters. Keitaro and Yuka start up a romantic relationship, and their dynamic ends as soon as it actually starts, with Yuka being killed, while Keitaro waits excitedly for their first date. Kiba quickly loses faith in any humanity after this, and embraces Smart Brain's cruelty, even going as far as to assume the role of CEO. The Orphanoch King awakens within a child that Kaido saved earlier in the show, and Orphanochs just start dropping like flies because the Orphanoch King's too much of a badass. And finally, Kusaka is murdered by Kiba, after Kiba steals the Kaiza belt from him for the final time. Obviously, a bunch of other stuff happens too, but those are the huge ones, and I'm gonna examine those two deaths right now, because I think they kind of outline a lot of the emotional stuff going on in the final arc. Yuka, in my opinion, is the one Orphanoch out of the three main ones we follow with the most sympathetic and tortured backstory. It's not rooted in any kind of man pain like with Kiba, and it's not the result of a random demonstration like with Kaido. No, Yuka just feels hurt. Genuine hurt by the only people she used to have. In Kiba, Kaido, Takumi, Mari, and Keitaro, she found community. People that she can lean on and hang out with. The wrinkle in this, however, is that she also lashed out the most out of any of the three Orphanoch. At the slightest sign of danger, she would go full power and wipe out her aggressors. I feel like a lot of people would say that this is understandable, given where she was coming from, but she also killed a gymnasium full of high schoolers. There are definitely criticisms to be had that I agree with about Yuka's arc being overtly cruel, and especially from a showrunner that has a trend of killing female characters for male development. However, I feel like Yuka is a really just especially good character, and her arc ending in her death honestly kind of feels right to me, especially as I feel like it goes on to highlight Kiba for what he truly is. On rewatch, Kiba being a villain by the end made a lot more sense to me for his character. Kiba's kind. He helps give a level head to his friends, and he's amazingly loyal. He also killed his former fiancée. And for what? Understandably moving on after a year? Sure, some could say that this was on accident. He didn't know what his Orphanoch abilities were capable of, I guess. But wasn't that murderous intent still there? This happening in episode 1 and just not coming back around until the very end strikes me as honestly super clever, as Inoue just lets the show and Kiba's character kind of fool you into thinking he's a super stand-up, incredible guy. What if this whole time he was trying to keep some sense of control over his situation, and that's why he didn't ally with Smart Brain, and he assumed leadership of his friend's dynamic? We can't be sure. There's a lot of gray area, just like everything else, but this point fascinated me, and it still does. I'm still thinking about Kiba. And obviously I don't think Kiba's character is perfectly executed. I think the whole business suit and slicked back hair shit is pretty cartoonish, even for Kamen Rider, and I feel like we could have used just a few more episodes of transition for his turn to go without a hitch, but honestly at this point I'm more impressed than I am critical of it. I think it's a fairly brave move, made even stronger by Kiba snapping Kusaka's neck towards the end of the show. Kusaka dying should have felt cathartic. Finally, this absolute fucking douche canoe bit it. Oh, we can finally stop with the fucking grin. This show can go smoothly again. But here, at this point, after Kiba's turn, after Yuka just died cruelly, after his treachery just kind of cooled down for a bit to go after a common enemy, it feels fucked up. And the show successfully makes you feel terrible about the guy's death. After everything, it still felt like the guy could have been saved from being a complete bastard. Maybe after things cooled down and Smart Brain was dismantled or something, maybe he could learn to deal with Orphnox after realizing that, hey, not all of them are out there killing folks. Maybe he could just hang out for once. But that never gets to happen because of his death, and that just feels suitably cruel. I don't know. I don't think I'm someone that really likes cruelty for cruelty's sake in stories. In a lot of the weaker ones, it never feels productive. It never feels right. Not that I need everything to be sunshine and rainbows or whatever, I just like for things to have purpose. If there's cruelty, then there should be something behind it. Some kind of meaning that makes it all make sense. At the end of the show, Takumi and Kiba have a final showdown, and it really hurts. These are two guys that tried to understand and love each other throughout the entire show. They tried to be each other's friends, and at times they were the only ones that could understand one another. And now, after all that's happened, we have them fighting to the death. Takumi wins, but he doesn't kill Kiba. He just leaves him to dwell on what's happened. And then, while Takumi and Mihara and all their friends are facing down against the Orphnaut King, Kiba sacrifices himself for some kind of resolution, as the final battle reaches its climax, and we fade out to an epilogue. It is super nice to see everyone chill out and live normal lives again. Huge mistakes were made, though, and you get the impression that if things were just a little bit different, we could have had an even happier ending. More than just this seemingly scraped-together conclusion. And then it kinda sunk in for me that Faiz is a cautionary tale, and one with more purpose and weight than any of Inoue's stories that I've seen thus far. Faiz says its message crystal clear. Reach out. Take a friend's hand, ask for help, tell them your feelings, improve your situation with community, and communicate with each other often. Take your time, heal, and get back up again. Make sure you are understood, and then you will be, by someone somewhere. And that's the only way we can hold on to what we have around us. All the misunderstandings and all the chaos, they had this purpose. To display how things just fucking fall apart without any communication. And it's really funny how all our heroes transform with goddamn cell phones. If they would just stop fighting for once and just pick up the damn phone, maybe they'd understand each other better. Alright, and that's the 5th episode right there in the can. Really quickly, just going to give a couple updates. One, I just want to say... a little while ago, I had a pretty bad run-in with YouTube. They took down my Tokusatsu in 2019 video, which really sucks, and I really don't want to have to bend over backwards to try to get it back up, or to do any of that and stuff, so it's probably just going to stay gone. I still have it, so I might host it somewhere else, and then just provide a link somewhere. I don't know. Follow my Twitter for any more information and stuff. It's at anti_laser. But I think after that, I'm gonna try and... The videos are gonna continue, but I'm gonna try and not make YouTube the only place where you can find Explode When Defeated stuff. So I'm looking into other options. I think I might make a blog version of this show. That's not completely confirmed or whatever, but I'm working on stuff. So again, for any updates on Explode When Defeated stuff, and any updates to the Patreon and things like that, please follow at anti_laser for any more information and for just my general presence on the internet. Listen to Discuss All Monsters, it's great. We have so much fun doing it, me and Wyatt. And yeah, so that's just a quick little update. We'll see you next time, next month, with my video on O-Ranger, the 1995 Sentai series.